Forrest Gump sits on a bench in Savannah, Georgia. He's a dim-witted but kind and social man. He's waiting for a bus. A woman sits next to him and waits for a bus too. He begins to tell her about his childhood. Time flashes back to young Forrest wearing leg braces to correct a curved spine. He lives in Greenbow, Alabama, and his mother makes money by renting rooms in the house to people passing through. Forrest's mother, Mrs. Gump, is raising Forrest alone. She meets with his school principal. He tells her that her son has an IQ of 75 and therefore cannot attend a public school as it's below the required IQ of 80. That night, Mrs. Gump engages in sexual acts with the principal so that Forrest is allowed to go to school. It is the first day of school for Forrest. He gets on the bus but can't find a seat. A girl, Jenny, asks him to sit next to her. They become good friends, and she teaches him to read. One day, Forrest is confronted by bullies who call him names. The bullies ride after him on their bikes. Jenny asks him to run. He does, and as he begins to pick up speed, the leg braces fall off. Forrest visits Jenny when she misses school. They run into the cornfield outside her house so she can avoid her father. Jenny asks Forrest to pray with her. She prays that God will make her into a bird so she can fly far away from her father. Social services rescue Jenny from her father, and she moves in with her grandmother, who lives close to Forrest. Jenny visits Forrest at night and says she's scared. Forrest doesn't know what she's scared about, but comforts her anyway. Forrest and Jenny are in high school. They are walking home together when Forrest's bullies arrive and ride after him in their car. Jenny tells him to run, and he finds himself sprinting across a university football field to escape his bullies. The coaches see him run and are impressed by his speed. He is offered a football scholarship to the University of Alabama. Time shifts to the present, and Forrest's companion at the bench must get on the bus. A woman with her son takes her place, and Forrest continues with his story. Time flashes back, and Forrest is waiting for Jenny outside her university dormitory. She pulls up with her boyfriend, and as they kiss, she accidentally hits her head. Forrest assumes the boyfriend is assaulting her and punches him, but Jenny yells at him to stop. Her boyfriend dumps her and drives away. Jenny invites Forrest to her room. Male visitors are against the dormitory rules, and Jenny is kicked out. Forrest meets President John F. Kennedy with the All-American football team. He graduates from college and poses for a photo with his mother, who is visibly proud of him. A military recruiter hands him a pamphlet for joining the army. Forrest joins the army and boards a military bus. A black man asks him to sit next to him and introduces himself as Benjamin Bufford, or just Bubba. He talks to Forrest about the shrimping business and how he worked with his uncle's shrimping boat when growing up in Alabama. Forrest talks to Bubba about how he fits into the army because he can easily follow its strict rules. The two of them become best friends. Forrest is in his bunk when a soldier tosses him a Playboy magazine that features Jenny wearing only her college sweater with nothing underneath. The photo gets her kicked out of university. Forrest takes a bus to Memphis to see Jenny performing in a show. She's introduced as the Beatnik Beauty, Bobby Dylan. As the curtains open, Jenny is revealed holding a guitar, naked. Forrest believes her dream has come true, since she always wanted to be a folk singer. Some men try to harass her, and Forrest thinks he needs to save her, so he attacks the men. Jenny is fired from the show. After the show, Forrest and Jenny walk together. Forrest confesses his love for her, but she says he knows nothing about love. A car pulls up. She gets in and tells Forrest to stay away from her. Before leaving, he tells her he is going to Vietnam. She wants him to be safe, so she tells him that he should not play a hero in the face of danger, but should run away. Forrest travels to Vietnam with the rest of the army and is welcomed by Lieutenant Dan Taylor. Lieutenant Dan comes from a military family. He has lost a relative in every American war and has much to live up to. Forrest and Bubba are trying to sleep through the rain. Bubba invites Forrest to join him in the shrimping business, to which he agrees. Forrest writes letters to Jenny almost every day. Forrest and his fellow soldiers are attacked. Dan and Bubba tell Forrest to run, but after running a distance, he realizes Bubba is not behind him. He returns to look for him and comes across a wounded soldier. Forrest carries the soldier to safety and returns to find Bubba, but keeps finding wounded soldiers instead. He carries them to safety. Forrest finds an injured Lieutenant Dan. He picks him up to bring him to safety, even though Dan tries to resist being rescued. Forrest goes back to look for Bubba and finds him seriously wounded. He talks to Bubba until Bubba dies from his injuries. Forrest is injured and returns from Vietnam. He is in a hospital bed next to Dan, who has had his legs amputated at the knees. A mail carrier brings a pile of letters that Forrest sent to Jenny while he was in Vietnam. While recovering in the hospital, a soldier teaches Forrest to play ping pong. He has a natural talent and has become very good. His fellow soldiers watch him play and are amazed at his abilities. One night, Dan wakes up Forrest and tells him he's angry with Forrest. Dan wishes he had died instead of having to live with amputated legs. Near the end of his recovery, Forrest is told he will receive the Medal of Honor. He rushes to tell Dan the news, but Dan is not in his hospital bed. A nurse tells him that he was discharged. Forrest goes to Washington, D.C., and is given his medal by President Johnson. After the ceremony, he unexpectedly meets Jenny, who is part of a rally of people protesting against the war in Vietnam. She introduces him to her friends, who include members of the Black Panther. Jenny's boyfriend is cruel to her, but Jenny stops Forrest from trying to save her again. She tells him goodbye and boards a bus with other protesters. Forrest is now part of the special services and travels to different hospitals to cheer up wounded soldiers by playing ping pong and teaching them to play too. He is so good that he joins the All-American Ping Pong team and is part of the first group of Americans to visit China in many years, as the two countries play ping pong matches against each other. When Forrest returns home, he's a national celebrity. He was on the Dick Cavett show and met Lieutenant Dan outside the studio. Dan is in a wheelchair and tells Forrest he does not deserve the Congressional Medal. As Dan wheels away, he loses control and falls into the snow. Forrest pushes him through Manhattan, and they end up in Dan's apartment and sit watching television. Lieutenant Dan and Forrest go to a bar on New Year's Eve. Forrest tells Dan that he plans to buy a shrimping boat because he made a promise to Bubba. Dan laughs and says he will be his first mate once he buys the boat, because he doesn't believe Forrest can fulfill his promise. Forrest and the ping pong team meet President Nixon at the White House. Forrest is discharged from the army and goes home. He finds his home filled with gifts from people. Mrs. Gump tells Forrest that someone offered $25,000 to say he liked using their ping pong paddle. Forrest doesn't want to lie, but does so he can use the money to fulfill his promise to Bubba. Forrest travels to see Bubba's family and tells his mother about the shrimping business idea, but she is skeptical about it. He visits Bubba at his grave and assures him that he will use the $25,000 to buy a shrimping boat. While Forrest works on his boat, Jenny is in a city, going to clubs and getting drunk and high. She almost commits suicide by jumping off a balcony, but stops herself at the last second. She sits on the balcony and cries. One day, as Forrest brings his boat to the harbor, he sees Lieutenant Dan and goes to meet him. Dan is there to fulfill the promise he made to Forrest by being his first mate. Forrest and Dan have little luck. A hurricane hits the area where they fish for shrimp. Only Forrest's boat isn't destroyed by the storm, which reduces the competition for shrimping. They become the most successful shrimpers in town. Dan thanks Forrest for saving his life. They start the Bubba Gump Shrimping Company together, which is successful, and they become millionaires. Forrest receives a call that his mother is sick. He rushes home and says goodbye to her. Forrest leaves Dan in charge of the business and moves back home. He gets a job mowing the football field at a high school to keep busy. Dan invests money from their company in Apple computer stock. It becomes a successful investment, and he sends half the money to Forrest. Forrest keeps his promise to Bubba and gives Bubba's mother half of the money he made with his shrimping business. Forrest's mother leaves their house to him. One day, Jenny appears and they hug. She stays with him for a while, and they talk about their lives. They take walks every day, and one day, Jenny spots her childhood home. She throws rocks at it and collapses on the ground crying. Forrest sits beside her and comforts her. Forrest asks Jenny to marry him, but she says no. He tells her that she doesn't want to marry him because he is not smart, but says he knows what love is. That night, Jenny goes to his bed and tells him she loves him. They kiss and make love. The next morning, Jenny leaves as Forrest sleeps. He is heartbroken after she leaves. Forrest decides he feels like running. He has run across the country for 5 years and makes national news. People are interested in why Forrest is running, and don't believe him when he says he's doing it because he feels like it. Forrest decides to stop running and returns home. Back in Greenbow, Jenny sends Forrest a letter asking him to come see her. It is now the present day, with Forrest sitting on the bench while waiting for a bus to visit Jenny. He finds out that he doesn't need to take the bus, as her house is only a few minutes away. He runs to Jenny's house. When he arrives, she hugs him and apologizes for hurting him. A small boy arrives in the company of a woman. Jenny introduces him as their son and says he is named after Forrest. At the playground, Jenny tells Forrest that she has a virus and doctors don't know what it is. It's Jenny and Forrest's wedding day. Lieutenant Dan arrives. He has prosthetic legs and can walk again. Dan introduces his fiancée, Susan. Forrest is so glad for him. Jenny and Forrest get married. They're happy as a family, and Forrest cares for Jenny as she becomes sicker. Jenny dies, and Forrest visits her grave to talk to her and let her know how Forrest Jr. is doing. Forrest and his son wait for the school bus together. The bus arrives, and Forrest tells his son that he loves him. His son says he loves him too. Forrest says he'll be waiting for him at the bus stop when he gets back from school. Forrest Jr. gets on the bus, and Forrest watches as it drives away.